Hello, my name's Emily and I enjoy quizzes. I was the president of my university quiz society for a year, I ran a pub quiz for 2 years, and so far I've appeared on 3 different TV quiz shows. So all of those experiences have got me thinking about what goes into making a good quiz, and I think one of the most fundamental parts that's probably pretty obvious is the questions have to be good. So I've got a few tips that I want to share with you about writing good quiz questions. Let's get on with it. Know your audience. It probably goes without saying, but people go to pub quizzes to have fun. So think about the sorts of things that your audience will find fun when you're writing your questions. If you're writing questions for a students' union pub quiz, you probably don't want to write an entire round based on one-hit wonders from the 1970s because the vast majority of students will get no points on that. And that's not fun at all. On the other hand, it is good to have themed rounds sometimes. So if you were raising money for your local tennis club, for example, you might want to stick a few more extra tennis questions in there because your audience is likely to be people who are interested in tennis. When I'm writing for a more general audience, I try and have a balance of academic and non-academic, hard and difficult, new and old, just to give something for everyone in a quiz, because it can be really frustrating if you go to a quiz and feel like you didn't have anything to contribute all night. Vary the difficulty of your questions. It can be very frustrating to sit through a round of pub quiz questions which are way too difficult for you and you haven't a clue what's going on in the question. But likewise, it can also be very boring if you're sitting through a round of questions that are way too easy for you and you don't even have to think to get the answers right. So I like to have a balance of different difficulties of questions within each round. I like to have 1 or 2 questions that every team should be able to answer and 1 or 2 questions that only the very top teams will be able to answer. On average, I generally aim for teams to get about 60 to 70% of the available marks because then it feels more fair and more like they're in with a chance of winning. Check your facts. There's lots of lists of pub quiz questions and fun facts available on the internet that you might be tempted to take some inspiration from when you're writing a pub quiz. I'll warn you now, they aren't always the most accurate things. It's usually best to go to the primary source when you're writing a question. So for example, if you're writing a question about some song lyrics, it might be worth giving that song another listen just to make sure you heard what you thought you heard. That isn't to say you need to have read War and Peace in order to be able to ask a question about it. There are plenty of study guides and book reviews available on reputable websites which are very useful sources for questions. Write questions that are easy to read and understand. Make sure that you can pronounce all of the words that you use in your questions, or don't use those words. It's really awkward for everyone involved if you're staring down at your sheet of quiz questions and you're struggling to pronounce the word who's it a pocked, who's it a poke tilly, instead of just saying the word whit's-poachedly. In the same vein, it's really confusing for audiences if you have too many small specific details in the question because they won't be able to jot them all down in time in order to get the answer. So for example, don't ask something like, what is the square root of the cube of the number of legs on 9 spiders minus the year in which the League of Augsburg was founded? Trimming down the unnecessary details can also improve the readability of your questions. Your questions should not be a case of you monologuing about how much obscure stuff you know. Test your questions out on a friend. This is especially helpful when you're just starting out with writing questions because it can be really difficult to tell how hard or how easy a question is if you're the person who wrote it. So getting a second opinion is always a good idea. I also find it really useful to ask other people when I'm writing rounds that I don't know very much about. So for example, if I'm writing a science round and I need a couple of chemistry questions, well, I don't really know anything about chemistry. So I'll write my questions and send them over to my friend who has a chemistry degree just to see if they're okay. Have fun with it! When you're passionate about a question, it shows. And I've always found that my favourite questions in pub quizzes are the ones that the quizmaster seems really passionate about. You don't have to stick to a standard question and answer format either if that's not for you. You can do lateral thinking questions or audio rounds or picture rounds. There's a load of different non-standard rounds that you can do, and I will do another video about those. I've also found that including humour in questions gets a really good response from a pub quiz audience and makes it a lot more fun. So there you have it. I hope those tips are helpful for when you're writing your own quiz. Let me know in the comments below what your favourite pub quiz question is. Cheers.